This museum is a beautiful tribute to so many American heroes. It's amazing to see. We did a pretty comprehensive tour, but not comprehensive enough. So, Lonnie, I'll be back. I told you that. Because I could stay here for a lot longer, believe me. It's really incredible. This tour was a meaningful reminder of why we have to fight bigotry, intolerance, and hatred in all of its very ugly forms. I had the privilege of visiting the National Museum of African American History and Culture right here in Washington, D.C. It's a new, beautiful Smithsonian museum that serves as a shining example of African Americans' incredible contributions to our culture, our society, and our history. It also tells of the great struggle for freedom and equality that prevailed against the sins of slavery and the injustice of discrimination. The work and love of the people who helped create such a masterpiece is a testament to the legacy of so many leaders it honors.
How the times have changed. Both of the clips you just saw were from Trump's visit to the National Museum of African American History and Culture all the way back in 2017. Now, he's dropped any semblance of pretending to care about the truth of our country's violent history, which was built on the foundational lie of white supremacy.
President Trump targeted the Smithsonian museums, saying they are, quote, out of control, where everything discussed is how horrible our country is, how bad slavery was, and how unaccomplished the downtrodden have been. Back in March, the president signed an executive order directing the Smithsonian Institution, which runs more than 20 museums in Washington and elsewhere, to, quote, celebrate American exceptionalism and remove divisive or partisan narratives.
Nothing about success, nothing about brightness, nothing about the future, and we are not going to allow this to happen. And I have instructed my attorneys to go through the museums and start the exact same process that has been done with colleges and universities, end quote.
Just pause for a second to really let this entire situation sink in. The president, who has shown affinity for white supremacist beliefs and has stocked his inner circle full of white supremacists and white nationalists like Stephen Miller, is targeting Smithsonian museums for highlighting the true, yet still sanitized to an extent, history of American chattel slavery.
Most of our public museums in the United States actually do not show how truly bad slavery was, because I think most Americans can't handle just the sheer agony, the sheer terror, the sheer violence it took to keep people enslaved their whole lives, laboring against their will, or to, most Americans can't really handle the agony of seeing children taken from their parents, or seeing the amount of terror that was required to keep millions of people enslaved.
Professor Kennedy is spot on. What we show in most public museums about our history of slavery doesn't even come close to really displaying the full terror and the full horror of what so many people did to enslaved Africans, right? We're not able to handle that. Well, a lot of people are not able to handle the type of evil it takes to treat people in that manner where you dehumanize their entire existence. So it's really funny that Trump has this commentary, even though we're not even giving the American public the full extent of how horrific slavery was in America.
The fact that our country was involved in slavery is awful. No one thinks otherwise. But what I saw when I was going through the museums personally was an overemphasis on slavery. Mm-hmm. And I think there should be more of an overemphasis on how far we've come since slavery. Our country is a country of progress, and it's the greatest country in the world. And we should be able to take our kids, our students through the Smithsonian and feel proud when we leave. While slavery is obviously a horrible aspect of our nation's history, you can't really talk about slavery honestly unless you also talk about hope and progress. And I think we need to be focusing on the progress that we've made since then, and we need to stop focusing so much on the lack of progress. We need to keep moving forward as a country.
Our new founding myth is that America was built on the backs of slaves, which isn't true. That's not true. Yeah, we had slavery. Was America built on slavery? No. Could America still have existed without slavery? Yes. The idea that we carry some kind of unique guilt for slavery, also not true. The idea that America was built on stolen land, not true. The idea that, we have no right to exist as a nation, not true. The idea that this country was founded by committing genocide against the Indians, not true.
Trump's words, regardless of them being total lies, carry a ton of weight and have real-world consequences that all of us have to deal with, especially in this particular case, since his perception of the museum exhibits lends credibility to white supremacist beliefs and conspiracy theories.
You cannot tie imperialism and racism and slavery to just one race, which is pretty much what every single exhibit does. But let's talk about the fact that when you
can't tie slavery.
Let's talk about the fact.
Slavery in America was.
Do you realize that only less than 2% of white Americans owned slaves?
But it was a system of white supremacy.
You realize that slavery is thousands of years old?
White people were
Do you know
the slave
who
owners.
was the first race to try to end slavery?
In the context of American history, in the context of American history, what are you saying is incorrect by saying that it was white people oppressing black people?
Every single thing is like, oh, no, this is all because white people bad. And that's just not the truth.
You brought up slavery, and you brought up the question of whether, you brought up the question of whether or not slavery in the United States is about race. The answer is yes.
I did not say
in the United States
don't
is
straw man
about
my argument
race.
because that's not what I said.
So what are you
brought
talking
up
about?
Slavery. And what I was talking about is that this isn't really about that. When you make every single exhibit about white imperialism when it isn't relevant at all, that is a problem.
She left out the part where half of the United States at the time of the Civil War seceded in hopes of preserving slavery. They left because this was such a big deal to them. Regardless of the number of white people who physically owned black people, a whole lot more white people definitely fought for the rights of those owners of people who happened to be black. She detailed how cotton picked by slave labor represented half of all U.S. exports, fueling the country's banks, factories, and institutions. Quote, without slavery, our nation would be unrecognizable to us, she said. We cannot let them choose the parameters. We cannot let them choose the parameters of the conversation in order to obfuscate the truth. And that is correct. She highlighted how slavery's reach extended far beyond the South. From the cotton Brooks brothers used to tailor its suits to the New York Stock Exchange, which was established in part to finance slavery-dependent enterprises. Enslavement, she emphasized, enriched U.S. president, members of Congress, Supreme Court justices, and many of the men whose faces are stamped on American currency.
Our country would not be as fabulously wealthy as it is today without the untold amount of stolen wages and profits generated directly from the labor done by enslaved people, my ancestors. And even if a large amount of white people didn't personally own enslaved people or even abolitionists, they still got to enjoy the economic conditions created by the slave trade and were infinitely better off than the enslaved people. I don't know why that's such a hard concept for so many people to grasp, but it is the truth, and it will always be the truth, okay? Whether you want to believe it or not. For Rebel HQ, I'm Chris Williamson. We'll see you next time.